Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's winter webinar series. And like Jane said, I am a licensed social worker. A lot of my experience has been in kind of the child abuse, child welfare, child advocacy world. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about. Specifically kind of having most of my work being on kind of the front lines in victim advocacy, in working with families kind of after abuse has occurred, and now having children of my own too. It's like, what can we do? What are things that we can do to help prevent this from occurring in the first place? And so, really excited to be in this role, and just share knowledge. With you all of prevention and so recognizing that knowledge is kind of that first step when I'm able to partner with you all, partner with community members, parents, caregivers, coaches, teachers, things like that, to be able to ensure that our children have safe communities, safe homes, and that we are equipped with that knowledge to prevent child abuse, if at all possible. And so that is kind of what my role here is as a prevention education coordinator, is getting to train. And so excited to share that with you today. Um, so moving in to kind of what we'll be covering today. So this is kind of just a basic overview of different kind of what child abuse is. I understand that everyone in this call comes to this call with varying level of knowledge surrounding kind of these topics. And so giving it just kind of that basic overview. So we'll be talking a little bit about what is child abuse and neglect? What are the kind of different forms, prevalence of those things? What are some of those risk factors and protective factors from an individual level, from a family level, and then from that community level as well? Things that we can do from kind of like macro or bigger picture ideas to be able to instill some of those protective factors to prevent against abuse. We'll talk a little bit about why prevention is important. If any of you have ever heard of kind of the ACE study or those adverse childhood experiences, we're going to be talking just kind of shortly on what are some of those outcomes that happen when child abuse does occur, and so why we focus on prevention from those aspects. We'll talk about what some of those prevention strategies are, some ways that you can approach organizations, community members, things like that, to be able to have some practical strategies. We'll touch on some mandated reporting, what are those legal and ethical responsibilities, and then some next steps as well. Bear with me, I have a little bit of cold, so if I sound kind of nasally, that is why. So, first of all, we're going to talk about what is child abuse. So, child abuse and neglect, this obviously is talking about any type of abuse and neglect of a child under the age of 18, by a parent, by a caregiver, by someone in maybe that like custodial role, that results in harm, that potential for harm, or threat of a harm to a child. Obviously, we have kind of four different types of abuse that we focus on. That first being physical abuse, and so this is this intentional use of force. Injuries that injuries can occur. Examples of this would be hitting, slapping, kicking, shaking, other uses of extreme force against a child. Sexual abuse. This is referring to any completed or attempted sexual acts or sexual contact with a child. This can be by, again, anyone this child knows, caregiver, parent, teacher, coach, kind of anyone in that role, but also can include like peer-on-peer abuse as well. Examples of this: fondling, penetration, exposing children to explicit material online, and even online exploitation of children. Emotional abuse refers to these behaviors that harm a child's self-worth. So name calling, shaming, rejecting, withholding love, things like that. And then neglect. Neglect is this failure to meet that child's basic physical, emotional needs. And so things like housing, food, clothing, access to medical care, access to quality education, and as well as having those feelings appropriately responded to. And so when we talk about child abuse, we often have people that think, like that would never happen in my community, or this would never happen in my group. The people that I'm surrounded with, these things happen, and in other communities, these things happen to certain groups of people. But in fact, we see that every socioeconomic group of individuals experience child abuse in some way, shape, or form. Rich, poor, middle income, all over the state of Minnesota. We see kids that come to Corner House from every city, from every kind of sector, and so it also is affecting children of every gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, and is in every community. We see too that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys experience child sexual abuse in the United States. From kind of a bigger picture too, 1 in 7 children in the last year experience abuse or neglect. These are often at the hands of someone they know. Globally, we see 1 billion children experience sexual violence, and child advocacy centers like Corner House that are working with kids who have had experiencing those allegations of abuse, are providing those victim services, victim advocacy, and support to families, are seeing over kind of 370,000 cases per year. And so, the importance of child advocacy centers, obviously, we see because 90% of cases of child abuse are someone that child knows, whether that's, again, parent, teacher, coach, babysitter, a peer, family friend, extended family, things like that. Even though the national statistic of sexual abuse lays at around 11% of all child abuse, CACs, or child advocacy centers, serve far more sexual abuse cases, which kind of indicates that deeper problem of that federal statistic, maybe not showing that full picture, whether that be through the lack of disclosure or conviction rates, or kids even disclosing in the first place. And so we see that, especially in kids in care. So when I'm talking about care, kids at camps, in youth sports, in religious settings, in educational settings, these organizations where kids are away from parents, are involved in any sort of thing, require that extra kind of attention from community members, and to see kind of what policies, what practices are in place to protect kids. Often these same organizations that obviously are created to protect and support children, to root out those that are seeking to harm them. Those same kind of dynamics that create that nurturing environment may also kind of uninherently open the doors to sexually abusive behaviors, if we're not careful with the volunteers that we're bringing in, the employees that we're bringing in. Research has shown specifically too that youth who are maybe more kind of emotionally insecure, needy, kind of are more vulnerable to the attention of offenders, specifically kind of in these areas. And so by promoting some of those kind of close relationships between youth and adults, organizations help youth feel supported and feel like they have someone in their corner, but at the same time can also kind of provide that opportunity for abuse to occur, if we're not watching for that. And so when we're thinking of how do we develop policies, we're kind of having that balance of how do we protect kids, but how do we also make sure that they feel safe and supported. And so we're going to talk a little bit, what are some risk factors? Risk factors are these characteristics that may increase the likelihood of experiencing or perpetrating child abuse and neglect. These aren't always direct causes, and sexual abuse specifically can occur without any of these risk factors happening. And so wanting to make a note too that sexual abuse does not occur because of a particular quality in the child necessarily. Those are solely kind of of based on the person perpetrating, the person abusing. And if we can understand why some children may be more likely to be vulnerable to sexual abuse, that's kind of where our prevention steps can come in, to provide that extra protection for those children. And so we see at an individual level having a weak or absent ongoing connection to a trusted and safe adult. So kiddos who feel very isolated, feel that they don't have any sort of adult in their corner that is watching out for some of these things, that is pouring into them, that's loving them, that has that connection, are going to be kind of maybe more targeted from a perpetrator standpoint in seeing, oh, this child is looking for something. They're looking for this validation from an adult figure. They're looking for this connection from an adult figure. A lack of information about body boundaries. We see in research too that kiddos who know the appropriate usage or names of their body parts, know about healthy body boundaries, are already kind of a step up in protection against a perpetrator. They're seeing these perpetrators are saying, okay, this kiddo's been taught something by someone, by an adult who's had conversations with them, maybe not the best target in this sense. And then kind of similarly, when a child feels emotionally isolated or neglecting, they're kind of seeking that validation, seeking that attention out to those perpetrators who are more than willing to give that throughout kind of that grooming process and things like that. Kind of on the flip side, the protective factors. What are things that help protect against this? These are the things that kind of decrease that likelihood of experiencing abuse, neglect, having that strong attachment to a caring adult. This could be a parent, grandparent, teacher, mentor. In our prevention training, we talk a lot about what does it look like for kiddos to be able to identify safe adults in their life, people that they can go to if abuse has occurred, but also that they have a strong connection to those adults who can speak into what are healthy relationships, what are healthy boundaries. Having these safe adults too that are looking out can tell when something feels off about that child. Parental resilience and coping skills. We see that when parents are able to manage stress, they're able to manage the ability to take in hard information and adapt to that. It creates that kind of more stable environment for children in the first place. They know, hey, no matter what, I know my parents are going to be able to be supportive, that they're able to, provide kind of the stable environment. And then those social connections and healthy boundaries. When we see things like positive social skills, positive kind of involvement in the community, being able to have healthy relationships, it can help kind of navigate challenges when they do come up more safely. So again, teaching about those healthy boundaries, body safety, recognizing unsafe situations, and how to speak up if something does feel wrong. And so from a kind of family and environment perspective, some risk factors, a lack of supervision. So this is whether it's physical supervision or online supervision, when children don't have caregivers that are noticing changes or behavioral changes, warning signs can go unnoticed a lot of times. It can be kind of those predators or those perpetrators breeding ground for vulnerable children. And so thinking of this kind of lack of oversight makes children more vulnerable in the first place to unsafe situations, whether that is in person or online, which we're seeing a lot more of these days as well. And so without kind of this active monitoring, this active supervision and engagement, children are more vulnerable to some of that inappropriate content, exploitation online, through social media, gaming, platforms, different apps. And so it's not just kind of about this physical presence, but also being engaged and aware of what's going on in that child's life. Another risk factor, settings where secrecy is frequently allowed or encouraged. And so encourages that discourage kind of this openness or this kind of secrecy around it, allow kind of abuse to sometimes go unnoticed when that is occurring. And then exposure to or easy access to pornography, child pornography, some of that X-rated media. We recognize the growing issue with children and their ability to access pornography and what that does to a child's brain, and the ability to have be kind of like desensitized to harmful behaviors. A lot of this can be seen acting out on other peers, and things like that. And so having access to that is further kind of increasing that risk of even further exploitation as well. There are a lot of different factors, obviously, that we could go into, where just kind of like settings where there is kind of little boundaries in families that maybe that children aren't recognizing these things as being something that is not normal, or is harder to kind of recognize as abuse. And so then on the flip side, some of those protective factors as well, from a family and environment, having that safe and stable family environment is able to provide that consistency, that security, builds trust, open communication. That child is able to trust, hey, when I come to my parent or my caregiver with, hey, this feels a little off, or so and so gave me this gift today, and I'm not really sure why. They're able to rely on that relationship to be able to kind of intervene when things do seem off, before abuse does happen. Having a supported extended family network as well, having again those people that are watching out for that child, recognizing when things are going wrong, and then having adequate housing and financial stability as well. When a family or when parents are able to focus on their children and be engaged in their life, and they're not worried about these financial stresses, they're not worried about these housing insecurity, things like that. Those barriers aren't kind of weighing on the ability to be fully engaged with what's happening in their child's life. And then from a community standpoint, so this is kind of this bigger picture. These are these conditions in that broader environment that can make children and families more vulnerable to abuse. First, we see like a lack of institutional support from law enforcement and the judicial system at times. And so when we see that reporting systems are either weak or responses are kind of inconsistent, it can often discourage victims from seeking help in the first place, specifically with maybe our kiddos who have experienced abuse or neglect and are in a place of like re-victimization. If that prior reporting and that prior case wasn't either didn't go anywhere, or they felt like they weren't kind of believed in that sense, this could lead to kind of some of those barriers of wanting to uh, speak up when something does feel off or something does feel that it's not safe. And so also lack of social services, resources, limited access to healthcare, education. Without a lot of these kind of services, families may struggle to address some of these bigger concerns, or even learn about kind of prevention resources in the first place. Even after abuse has occurred, too, having a lack of resources such as counseling, family support, and kind of what that looks like in crisis. And then finally, kind of those cultural norms that tolerate sexual violence. When we have in the media, in the community, those norms of how we view women and children and all of these things, when these harmful attitudes are accepted or minimized, it becomes harder to protect and enforce boundaries for children. It becomes harder for children to recognize, is this normal? Because what I'm seeing almost kind of glorifies this, or kind of praises this, and so, or doesn't believe victims. And so when we're thinking of what are some shifts that we can take from a cultural norm perspective to address prevention. And then on the flip side, again, protective factors for the community, having strong community support systems, whether that is through schools, churches, the social services, people that are coming around children to be able to teach healthy and safe dating relationships, safe peer relationships, promoting some of that healthy sexuality, having more kind of empowerment-based training. When we're able to focus on policies that can help strengthen families' financial stability, can reduce child abuse and neglect as well. These policies help parents to be able to meet those basic needs of those children, that food, medical, shelter, educational needs, and things like that. And so also those sexual abuse prevention programs and policies that are in place at anywhere a youth is involved in. And so to the extent too that community has allowed isolation to occur, or isolated access to children specifically to occur, this is shown kind of to raise maybe that potential risk for victimization as well. So things like having community organizations that have people that kind of have what we call like this unguarded access to children, whether that is through like religious leaders, coaches, even doctors, leaders of like boys and girls clubs, other places where perpetrators may seek out that employment or seek out those volunteer opportunities in order to have that access to children in the first place. There was a research study that did that kind of followed like 40-ish serial perpetrators, found that over half of those specific perpetrators picked that profession solely because of their access in order to gain access to children. And so when we allow kind of that privileged close contact, when we're not where we're taking that for granted and saying like, oh, this person would never do such a thing. They're so esteemed in their community. They're so looked at with great honor and praise of this person. They would never do something like this to a child. When we're not quick to catch ourselves on that and say, you know what, this can happen at any time, and not have those safeguards up, we kind of can open those doors for potential abuse occurring without us being able to see that. And so again, this is kind of one of those reasons why families who have that have healthy and ongoing social connections are less likely to be sexually victimized, and through accountability from those organizations and supervision at that community level can significantly drop that risk of abuse. And so when we're thinking of what kind of policies this include, or what kind of questions can you ask the organizations that are in your children's lives, in the lives of children around you, asking like, what kind of process do you have for screening and hiring volunteers? Are you performing background checks? What does that interview process look like? Are you gathering references? Asking kind of behavioral based questions like, tell me about a time when you had to enforce a safety rule, or like scenario based questions. Why do you want to volunteer with a youth? What would you do if you saw another staff member breaking a boundary violation? How would you report that? What would you define as like appropriate boundaries between adults and children? And then asking kind of about what are their guidelines on interactions, like those one-on-one interactions. Are they allowing children to have one-on-one interactions with adults with the door open? Or is this only happening in like a shared space? Are they using a buddy system? When going into places where that child may be alone with an adult. How about when taking kids to the bathroom? I know when I was out in Colorado, there was a church that had come to us after some pretty significant abuse had occurred within their community, and they said, we did all of these things that we thought would protect against this. We did all the background checks of all of the adults. We did all this, but what they forgot and kind of overlooked was allowing those same kind of rules to also apply to their teenage like assistant
Not yet.
teachers. Um, And so, in that case, they were saying, you know what, this teenager, this older kid, is helping out, but we're not having holding him to the same standard as we are these adults, and that's kind of where that abuse was occurring because they were allowing that child or that older child to take the children to the bathroom by himself, which is where that abuse was occurring. And so, even with organizations making sure that any like teenagers are also kind of going through these same interaction guidelines when it comes to interactions with younger children. How do they monitor behavior? How are you ensuring that safe environments? How are they responding to inappropriate behavior that does come up? Are they handling this internally? Are they going through those proper channels of reporting? What do they do if something does arise? And how are they dealing with that? And so we see that abuse and neglect can be prevented. Certain factors may increase or decrease this risk of experiencing child abuse and neglect. But it first kind of comes down to understanding what are those risk factors that put people at risk to protect them from violence in the first place. And so I love this quote too, that this safety and security don't just happen. They're the result of this collective consensus and public investment. So this isn't just a family issue. This isn't just kind of an individual issue, but it's this bigger, wider group of who's surrounding us, this community and public investment in children. And so when we talk about the short-term outcomes of child abuse, I talked a little bit about earlier the ACEs study. So these are adverse childhood experiences, the impact that they can have on a child's health and well-being over time. And so first, with any sort of child abuse, obviously there's these kind of short-term risks. There's this the physical harm, those bruises, fractured, sexually transmitted disease, even pregnancy, things like that. Psychological distress. This appears quickly. Children may experience fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, depression. There's a reason specifically with sexual abuse that keeps children quiet a lot of times is because of that shame, and so can create great psychological distress, and then developmental disruption as well. So impairing kind of that brain development and cognitive functioning, which can impact kind of how they are in school and even beyond. And then some long-term outcomes. Child abuse doesn't just affect children in the moment. It has lifelong outcomes and consequences as well. We see with the ACEs too, the kind of the rates of things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic illnesses, autoimmune disorders can be significantly higher and linked to prolonged stress and trauma, specifically from childhood. We see the risk of mental health disorders being significantly more common in people who have experienced abuse or neglect. Some of those behavioral and social consequences. Survivors are a lot of times at an increased risk for substance use, involvement in like the criminal justice system, and even continuing some of those cycles of abuse in future generations. The economic and societal costs as well. Child maltreatment. In fact, in 2018, they looked at kind of what is this like estimated lifetime economic burden on child abuse and neglect in the U.S. and it looked at over was about $592 billion. And so this is comparable to things like crises such as like heart disease and diabetes. And so when we're looking at that impact that child abuse has on even the society, and then that neurobiological impact. Research on these adverse experiences shows that just how trauma impacts the brain can alter those kind of stress hormone systems and even like gene expression. So affecting even their children's children and things like that. And so when we're thinking of how this actually physically changes the neural makeup of a child. And so these kind of outcomes focus on why prevention is not just something that we should do, but it's also a public and economic priority as well. And so we see here at Corner House, early intervention and prevention works. This is what we know to be true, and this is why I'm so passionate about being able to be on this education side of how do we prevent child abuse? How do we prevent perpetrators from having access to children that is unguarded? How do we ensure that children do have safe and stable environments? We see a lot of people ask kind of like, why don't you do like children specific training, or why don't you go into the schools more often? And what we've seen and what we've kind of chosen to focus our attention on, at least now, is that adults specifically, these parents, caregivers, teachers, coaches, these are the people that are those primary gatekeepers of children's safety. Adults have the legal authority and control that environment, and so they can control access to children and enforce those boundaries. Monitor those interactions between other adults and those children, and intervene when grooming behaviors do occur. Children lack that legal and social power to stop that abuse, and sometimes know how to report effectively without adult support to begin with. So when we're focusing on prevention strategies that empower adults to act, we see that the research shows is much more impactful than maybe just these kind of one-off child-focused programs. There was a study out in Vermont that kind of looked at this longitudinal data of when they had started kind of the statewide implementation of a prevention program, that adult-focused training programs directly correlated with a 72% decrease in child sexual abuse cases, and a reduction in children who were sexually harming other children as well. And so they saw that completing these adults trainings had a greater impact, a greater reach, because you think of every adult that we're able to train, how many kids that adult has in their life, who they can be a trusted source for, that is kind of more far-reaching than just targeting smaller groups of children. Research often shows too that some adults maybe have some misconceptions about like what grooming behavior is, or abuse dynamics. And so when we're able to provide training around maybe correcting some of those misconceptions, we're teaching adults early about how to early intervene and identify some of those warning signs before abuse does occur. And so when the adults also learn how to respond appropriately to disclosures, understand mandated reporting, children often can't navigate on that on their own. And so we see too that this over reliance on like a child focused strategies, or talking to children directly, can sometimes unintentionally shift that responsibility on children to keep themselves safe rather than adults to keep children safe. And so that's kind of why we focus on why we educate adults in this. We're able to influence some of those social norms, increase that community awareness and vigilance around kind of what are things to look out for, safer organizational policies, and things like that. And so again, with that bottom line, adults have the capacity and authority and responsibility to prevent abuse. We see that this leads to that drastic and measurable reductions in abuse. And so with that, Corner House has taken kind of this initiative in creating this type of education programming for parents, for caregivers, for people in their lives, and that greater community. We have some specific prevention trainings that focus specifically on what are those practical strategies, such as like body safety 101, like some really practical tools of how to talk to your kids, and give you the language to have those conversations, to talk about healthy touch, and how to identify grooming or inappropriate behavior, how to teach healthy relationships, how to keep kids safe online, and talking a little bit about online exploitation, how to stay safe digitally, and then how to identify trusted adults in a child's life. And so when it comes down to abuse as well, when a child has disclosed abuse to you, or you're um, questioning whether maybe something has happened. Some people might jump to making that CPS report right away, which is oftentimes necessary, but important to kind of think of those steps too before making that report. So, is this a instance of inappropriate behavior where we can intervene before this becomes an abuse kind of situation? Um, all 50 states kind of going over, I guess, the overview of what is required from a mandated reporter. All 50 states have laws regarding mandated reporter. And so in Minnesota specifically, this includes those who work with children, teachers, law enforcement, et cetera, to report suspected abuse or neglect. This idea of reasonable cause or reasonable suspicion is enough. You don't have to be certain that this is required. And oftentimes we could sometimes miss out on that too. If it's like, you know what, something in my gut feels off, but I can't quite prove it. Making that report, being able to have the appropriate people to talk to that child of, is there something going on? And we don't want to miss that. And then at the same time too, are there situations that are reported? Is this more of a resource issue, or is this a truly kind of abusive situation? So are there ways to connect a family to resources in their environment, if it is some of those like basic needs, such as housing, food, clothing, things like that. A lot of states have introduced to like helplines, allowing community members to find out for support for families, that rather than reporting maybe an abuse situation. And so yeah, mandated reporting, we talk a lot about too, and what does that look like to either make a report or how to intervene in our prevention trainings as well. And so some next steps, book a prevention training in your community. Ask about those policies in different youth serving organizations or educational settings. Support those policies at a macro kind of level, for accessible mental health treatment, early education, financial stability, that social emotional programming, and then talk to the children in your life. Talk to them about body safety, what it looks like to trust their gut when something feels off, what it looks like to have healthy relationships, what it looks like to stay safe online. So having these conversations gives us the ability to prevent abuse before it occurs. And so we love to obviously be a part of every community that we are invited into. And so we have kind of those three main prevention trainings that we focus on. We typically start with our body safety 101. And so again, this is this 1 hour training. If you're interested in learning more about this, please feel free to reach out. There is the QR code at the bottom. But again, this covers kind of those tangible things. We include like a safety toolkit for you to be able to go through with the children in your life, whether you're a teacher, a coach, a parent, any of these things. This training, because we understand the importance and the significance and the value in it, does have a nominal fee attached to it, but this is just to ensure that we can continue doing the prevention work in our communities. But yes, we would love you to reach out if you have any questions, or would like to host a prevention event in your community, whether this is like a parents group that you're a part of, your church, your greater community. We'd love to come speak on that. And so with that, I will open it up for any questions, comments, anything that anyone would like to add. Awesome. Well, I will stick around, but definitely we would love for you to take our brief survey. There's a QR code there at the bottom that just helps us to be able to see what do you want to hear more about from training? What are things that you're looking forward to seeing from Corner House in the future? We also have our adorable facility dog, Stuffy. He has been a great addition to our to our organization in being able to support kiddos during forensic interviews, supporting staff quite a bit as well with the emotional baggage that we bring in for Stuffy to take from us. And so you can follow him on Instagram. He does have an Instagram page. He is the best boy. So with that, I thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at future trainings.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. Yeah, I do want to say, just to reiterate, for training that we know not all of you are local, so prevention certainly can be done in person and virtually. And I did, Stephanie mentioned the 2018 cost of child abuse that was across the United States is like 500 billion. Um, South Carolina just finished a similar survey and found that child abuse and neglect just in one state, South Carolina, cost 21 billion. So we can see there's a little bit of increase in that. And this is not to minimize child abuse or to put a dollar on a child. But we know in this world where we are trying to create that really community, cultural, societal change. A lot of times our elected officials are looking at what's the bottom line. And the bottom line is that child abuse is costly monetarily as well as emotionally, physically. The impact is grand. So those people that are out there doing those surveys and that research is amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Any questions?
any questions? Or is anybody using any other prevention? Certainly there's other curriculum out there. As Stephanie mentioned, we're focusing on the adults and it's that drop down,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I spent a lot of time going into schools, but I was, you know, Miss Jane or Mrs. Straub that came in for one day in that child's life versus those trusted adults that we're training that are then in the lives of these kids. And that makes a difference.